Alrighty, as promised, we have gotten the full chapter 15 spoilers with all the pages and the fan translations on top of that. So in this video, I'm basically explaining what happened in the chapter and my initial reactions to the most glaring events. And then I'll go a lot more in depth into what certain parts mean, as well as my reaction to each part in the chapter review. So once again, if you want to see the full chapter review, that should be coming out on the 20th, on the day of the official release of chapter 15. And if you want to see that video, make sure to subscribe, just so YouTube recommends that to you once a video gets released. Anyways, without further ado, let's get into these spoilers. So the chapter begins inside of one of Orochimaru's hideouts, which we all know is where Boruto is hiding with Kashin Koji, and it looks as if Gaara has sealed Shinki, Yodo, and another Sand Village shinobi in a cage in order to protect them. Shinki is kind of begging Gaara to release a jutsu so he can help him fight Matsuri, but Gaara just straight up refuses. He tells them to run away immediately, and we can see he's clutching his stomach, and it looks as if he's received a fatal wound from Matsuri. Matsuri then says she didn't intend to stumble across these guys, and she really just doesn't care about them. She was simply looking for Boruto and his associate, and these guys just simply got in her way, and her curiosity got the better of her. Matsuri tells Gaara that he should be more concerned about the gaping hole in his stomach rather than the kids behind him, but Gaara doesn't care and is more concerned about the future of the Sand Village than his own life, which is why he is the true go of all the Kazekage. But I think the most interesting thing about this whole situation is the fact that the Sand Village have managed to get closer than anyone to Boruto's actual location, and the fact that they made it to the hideout is a pretty huge feat on its own, since as far as we are aware, nobody had managed to pin it down to one of these hideouts. But it seems as though the genjutsu Kashin Koji placed on the hideout has come in clutch, as even though they are searching the hideout, they never actually managed to encounter Boruto or Kashin Koji. Anyway, Shinki managed to break free from the sand prison using his own iron sand, and he does the hand signs for a sealing technique as one of the claw grimes go to eat Gaara, and he manages to seal his father away before the claw grime can actually eat him. Shinki says the Sand Village still needs him, and Matsuri is kind of pissed off that the claw grime didn't manage to eat Gaara, and we get to see him in the process of doing the sealing jutsu as a claw grime pounces on him and creates a tree out of Shinki. This whole moment is very reminiscent of the moment Sasuke tried to save Boruto from the code and the claw grimes. And perhaps the awakening of the Shinju itself is tied into the heightened emotional state that someone is put into when they are having a moment of self-sacrifice. Like Sasuke, for example, who would have been at a state of high emotions when he was sacrificing himself to save Boruto, and hence why instead of just becoming a tree like other people, he actually became one of the Shinju. And this theme is repeated for the rest of the Shinju, as if you remember in chapter 12, when Boruto told Konohamaru that Moegi was turned into one of the Shinju, Konohamaru thought back to the quote-unquote festival, where I presume Moegi sacrificed herself to save Konohamaru, and that's why she wasn't turned into a tree, but a Shinju instead. And it's because of that reaction that we can tell the formula for a Shinju to manifest is both the strong emotions of the vessel and them in fact being turned into a tree at the time of that emotional state. And it likely ties into the chakra of that individual running through their body at the time, because we know that chakra is tied into someone's emotions, so it makes sense as to why an emotional reaction could trigger such an event. Matsuri thinks to herself that if Shinki becomes one of them, then that would make things very interesting, as the sealing technique that Shinki uses required him to be alive, but only Shinki himself can lift the sealing jutsu used on Gaara. But that implies that there is obviously a chance that a user doesn't become a Shinju, which we already kind of knew since certain people had become trees and not Shinju, which I believe means that within the reading hideout, where like I said previously they all kind of chill out and read, there is a collection of thorn souls that just don't manifest when placed on a chakra cube itself. Anyways, we then jump to the conversation between Kankuro and Shikamaru, where Kankuro says that he needs Shinki to save Gaara. But while the whole conversation is ongoing, we can see one of Kashin Koji's toads looking in on the conversation. However, it's unclear as to whether or not Shikamaru is aware of this toad, as it is kind of shown in front of Shikamaru, but regardless, it is clear that Kashin Koji is using his toads everywhere to gain intel on different parts of the world, which is insanely overpowered in my opinion, since it means that Boruto will constantly have lots and lots of information about whatever he needs or what's going on and where through the source of Kashin Koji. And as we saw with Jiraiya and the pain fight, a shinobi's greatest asset is information. Anyways, we then cut to the Shinju hideout, where we can see Ryu stood on top of the chakra cube, but Matsuri notices that Ryu's behavior is extremely odd. And perhaps we are seeing how different people Shinju react differently after certain events occur, as they also notice that Hidari has seemed to change after the reawakening or the rejuvenation as a Shinju from the Thorn Soul. So I presume that this idea of different Shinju having different characteristics will be played on later in the story. But Ryu notices that there is something watching them through the chakra cube, and it turns out to be Code who is spying on them, and Shinki uses his iron sand to rip Code out of the chakra cube itself. But what is interesting here is the fact that Shinki managed to summon the iron from his claw marks, which when you think about it is insanely busted. Not only do these Shinju have a stupid amount of chakra, meaning that he can infuse as much chakra into the sand, meaning he can almost use as much of it as he wants. But if he sets up the claw marks in the right spots, he will also have an infinite amount of sand at his disposal, because he can simply keep using sand from different locations where his claw marks are. But Jura tells Ryu to be gentle with Code, since he is grateful to Code for allowing them to become what they are. But Code and Jura basically have a back and forth here, where Code is just being kind of hostile and thinks he's much better than he actually is, even though he is beyond fodder at this point. But to give you a rundown of what was said, Code basically was like, I want to eat the chakra fruit, so you guys better not do that before me. And Jura's just like, we've got other things to worry about. And he gives Code a literal challenge because he thinks that lowly of Code and his power. And he says to Code, kill Boruto and his associate, and he will in fact give him the chakra fruit. This disrespect pisses off Code, and he tries to start on Jura, who is like, know your place, my guy. And as Code uses his white karma form and tries to put his arm through Jura's claw mark, Jura literally blows off Code's hand in an instant as if it was nothing. And Jura just says, take this assignment or challenge as a way to spice up your dull and gloomy life. Not only did Jura just take off Code's hand like it was Play-Doh, he literally just calls Code's life entirely dull. Come on, Kishimoto, you didn't need to do Code this terribly dirty. The disrespect constantly on display towards Code is criminal, and Code just goes from worse to worser chapter by chapter. And Code is just filling out his L stat line as if he was prime Michael Jordan, but I almost think that the Code disrespect is so insanely overdone, it's actually foreshadowing for Code's insane comeback. Like, I'm talking even more than 2018 LeBron. Code is down 3-0 and losing by 30 in the fourth quarter, but my guy is about to reverse sweep the entire series. Just wait guys, I can see the vision. Anyways, back to the chapter, the Shinju kind of mock Code as he scampers away once again, just like the little rat he is, and we then cut to Jura talking to Ryu about his instincts. And Ryu confirms that his target is Gaara, and it seems as though since Ryu knows that Shinki created the seal on Gaara, he knows that he can also lift it. But it will be interesting to see, with everyone going to try and stop Ryu from eating Gaara, what will happen when they find Kashin Koji's hideout, and whether if Kawaki goes to this location and Amado sees traces of Kashin Koji through Kawaki's eyes, then he will be able to pinpoint exactly how to get to Kashin Koji, and Amado will ultimately be able to shut him down. We then cut to on top of the Hokage monument, where Kawaki approaches Boruto from behind, so it's clear that Boruto has erased his chakra nature, but made sure that Kawaki could still come and find him, as he likely wants to talk to Kawaki about the bombshell he is about to drop in the coming pages. Anyways, he asks Kawaki if he came alone, and Kawaki says yes, don't worry, but there is obviously the chance that Ada is watching them right now, but apart from that, Boruto has nothing to worry about. Boruto then says, why haven't you attacked me yet, Kawaki? And Kawaki just brushes past that and says to Boruto, what is he even doing? And why didn't he tell Konoha about the truth between him and Kawaki swapping places? Boruto just says that if he had done that, then nothing good would come from it. And no matter what the truth actually is, there will be people who do believe it and those who don't. And it'll just create a massive divide in Konoha and even more confusion. Now this is another thing which I talked about recently, with the split of those who come to realize the truth as well as those who don't, but at least Boruto is taking any measures possible to ensure that this split doesn't actually happen, as he says without it, Konoha can act as normal, and that is how it should be. Otherwise, it would simply devolve into chaos. He says that Konoha are simply acting accordingly to what they should be doing if there was a traitor who committed treason, and he isn't worried about what they're going to do to him because of his strength, and that's thanks to his master. Kawaki then says what happened to Momoshiki and whether Boruto actually settled everything with him, as well as the alarming fact that Boruto still cannot use his karma. To which we finally get the reason as to why Boruto hasn't used his karma and what actually happened during the time skip that has caused Boruto to be so scared of this power. Boruto explains that around 2 years ago when Sasuke and himself faced off against Code, he used his karma for the first time since leaving the village. village. But after doing so, he felt himself being taken over by Momoshiki, or at least feeling close to that sensation that he normally would feel. Now that actually ties into what occurred during the flashback in chapter 5, where Boruto almost apologizes to Sasuke as if he has made a mistake. And it was this mistake that forced Sasuke to end up sacrificing himself to save Boruto. As Boruto tried to use his karma, something ended up going wrong, and because something went wrong and Sasuke had to step in, it forced Sasuke into a position where the only option was to sacrifice himself, meaning Boruto feels directly responsible for Sasuke's death, or the capturing of Sasuke, however you want to put it, and the weight of that guilt all boils down to the karma, and hence why he's terrified of this power. Boruto says that when he activated his karma, he stopped being himself, and it felt like he was dying, though still conscious. And since that, he hasn't used his karma since. Which is very interesting, and I'll analyze more of what I think this means in the full chapter review, but essentially this could tie into the thing we saw when Boruto used Karma V2 and then had that heart attack, where Boruto isn't physically harmed, but he feels intense pain, and that's what allows Momoshiki to take over. Boruto then says for the past 3 years, Momoshiki has been completely silent, and Boruto thinks that him activating his karma is what allows Momoshiki to manifest, which actually makes sense, since Boruto used the karma more and more before the end of the pre-time skip, which is why we saw Momoshiki manifest more and more inside of Boruto, the closer we got to the time skip. And it became so potent, or Momoshiki's manifestations were so potent, that Sasuke and Kawaki were actually able to see Momoshiki at one point because Boruto had used the karma so much and drawn out so much of Momoshiki's resonance. Kawaki is worried by what Boruto's just said, and he says that Boruto is deteriorating even more than he thought he was. Obviously, since he is still not over the fact that Momoshiki is a threat to Naruto and their world, Boruto then confirms that he is no match for Jura in his current state, meaning that we have finally got confirmation that Jura is actually stronger than Boruto, a very intentional piece of information which allows Boruto to still have some room for growth in terms of power. And the reason this was likely added into the story is because the writers want us to begin to think about or anticipate the reintroduction of the karma and how that affects Boruto's strength, or dare I say the fabled jougan is going to be coming very soon. Anyways, Boruto says he needs Kawaki to help him in order to defeat the Shinju, but Kawaki then says, nah bro, we haven't stopped talking about Momoshiki, and Boruto just ignores this and says once the Shinju are gone, and if I rampage, kill me straight away without hesitation. So we can see the guilt of the karma still takes its toll on Boruto, but Boruto has to suppress this in order to save their world from the Shinju, and after he knows everyone is safe, he is then happy to reach that same resolve he came to when he allowed Kawaki to kill him after being taken over by Momoshiki. Boruto then says to Kawaki, it would have been ideal if Naruto trained him, but it's too late for that now, and he says to Kawaki that he's going to tell him something that Kawaki will end up figuring out himself soon enough, but the sooner Boruto tells him, the better it is for Kawaki. And he tells Kawaki that Amado is actually limiting Kawaki's true power, and we cut to Amado, who is looking in on this conversation, obviously very worried. Boruto then says Kawaki's attacking potency, his healing, and his defenses are all a lot weaker than they actually should be. Which, if you think about it, all of these things Boruto mentioned have actually already been foreshadowed. For example, you have defense. Kawaki got knocked down by Jura and Mitsuki with next to no difficulty. In terms of healing, he has taken much longer to recover, and attacking potency, we've seen that he's done nothing to Jura, and he's also had his rods dodged by many people, whereas Jigen and Ishiki, when they summoned the rods, it seemed undodgeable by anyone except Barry Mode Naruto. Amado gets mad at Boruto telling Kawaki this, and he says, where did you get this information from, Boruto? And then he remembers back to when Kawaki destroyed that toad, and realizes that this all boils down to Kashin Koji. But he thinks to himself, how is Kashin Koji responsible for all of this? And he is just confused by the whole thing, so it seems like he hasn't fully pieced the puzzle together, but he is extremely close to doing so. And when he does, I have a feeling Kashin Koji is gonna be gone, as Amado likely has a shutdown code for him like he does to all the other cyborgs. And it also ties into the idea with the parallels of Jiraiya, with Kashin Koji knowing his death is imminent, much like Jiraiya did, but by using his toads in 10 directions and gaining intel, he intends to help Boruto as much as he can before his death, which will ultimately help Boruto defeat the Shinju and the looming threats of that world. An insane parallel, and the revelations we are getting this chapter rival that of you in 10 directions in my opinion. An insane chapter, one of the best ones yet. But finally, Boruto says he has to go now. We don't know what for, likely to do with the Sand Village incident, But Kawaki stops him and is like, my line of thinking hasn't changed, and he is still insistent that the Otsutsuki are the root of all evil, and Boruto should still be eliminated without a trace, but he comes to the conclusion that they need to get rid of the Shinju first, and they can deal with Boruto and himself later. So Kawaki agrees to team up with Boruto in order to defeat the Shinju, and Boruto just laughs and tells Kawaki not to drag him down, and Kawaki just says, same for you too, Boruto, you piece of trash. So it's nice to see some banter between these two, and the narrator comment is, after all this, the two have finally come to unite to face the Shinju, but how will Konoha deal with the Sand Village issue? So like I said in my chapter predictions for this chapter itself is just going to be an extension of chapter 14, where we are still moving into the Sand Village arc. We just needed to cover a few things before doing so, and this chapter did a perfect job of wrapping up that whole arc. Anyways, that is going to be it for the spoiler review. I know I went quite in depth here, but there are still a few things that I definitely want to cover in the full chapter review, so I'll still be sure to make that video, especially once I get more official translations for this chapter. But make sure to comment your thoughts on the chapter itself. Also, make sure to like the video if you did enjoy, as it pushes it out to more and more people. Also, if you want to see more content like this, then make sure to subscribe so YouTube knows to recommend you my videos in the future. And I can assure you, you do not want to miss out when I do the chapter review. It's going to be an absolute banger, you can trust me. But with that all said, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you all in the next one. Goodbye.